Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. My name's Gary Turner. That lovely tune you just heard, well, I think it's a lovely tune, is from a good friend of mine, Pete Griffiths, who is a DJ and musician, and he created a track for me a while ago called Kaleidoscope. And I think that's a really beautiful sort of metaphor and visual for the conversation we're going to have today around the sort of multiple lenses to our humanity. So I'm looking forward to bringing our guest on stage right now. So let me bring Taylor Crain into the space. Good morning to you, I believe, Taylor. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, I feel privileged. I'm almost, I know we don't know each other deeply yet, but I'm a little bit of a fanboy because like your work, like your focus area, I think is really quite incredible. I'd really love to invite you just to take a couple of moments, if you don't mind, Taylor, just to give a bit more context as to, who you are in the world and the work that matters most to you before we get going today.
Great. Sounds good.
Lovely. So give us a little bit of a lowdown. What is it that really fires up Taylor this Friday?
I would say definitely not the weather. It's very cold and kind of dreary here in Austin right now. But I'd say I get fired up by social justice, community organizing, and I think being able to meet with people like you. I've had the honor of meeting, Gals Hutchins, who does great stuff on generative leadership. Frank Spencer took his course on Foundations of Natural Foresight. So I think just the idea of tackling systems holistically and facilitating change in community that gets at the root of problems that affect across, the axes of identity and oppression. And so I kind of tackle that through storytelling, and facilitating spaces that are truly inclusive and have a belonging that bring people like me who are non-binary and Black to really feel like they can breathe their whole self. So yeah, that's what fires me up.
Nice, light, soft topic for a Friday morning. I love it. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Now, for those that are watching live or may watch us back, Taylor, just a reminder that the seed really for today is it decolonization, colonization, systemic oppression. Like these are not light topics, but at the same time, I think we've got a mutual appreciation of the importance of play and levity while trying to do the deep work. And that's sort of what emerged for me with this. It's a game, but it's not a game, right? Which is what I call decolonizing our minds through generative listening. Now,
Yeah.
as I set this up with Taylor, a quick reminder that the deck of cards I'm going to use are the Without Modernity cards by an incredible organization called Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures. So you can find decolonialfutures.net. If you're interested to look at their work, please check it out. The other half of the cards is from one of my fantastic teachers of the thinking environment, and it's called the Listening Deck from Jane Adshead Grant. Now, what I do with this, and I know, Taylor, you very kindly engaged in one of my previous live streams, is it's not very technical. I'm sorry, it's not very PS5-like, but it's literally me, Gary Turner, shuffling the cards. So I'd love for you to tell me when to stop.
Okay.
So let me know when you're ready.
All right, you can stop.
Lovely. So I'm starting with the Without Modernity cards. And this card says, what cultural ignorances do you continue to embody, and what social tensions are you failing to recognize? So that is randomly picked from the decolonial. It's a beautiful question, and we're both going to explain a little bit about what that might mean for us from our different contexts.
Yeah.
But let's now shuffle the listening deck cards. And again, if I may, Taylor, just let us know when you're ready, and I'll stop shuffling. Thank you.
Great. Okay, stop.
Okay, the top card is be open-minded. So be willing to have your mind changed. Wow. Celebrate the diversity of thoughts from others.
Yeah.
So we're going to bring those two together. So what Taylor and I are going to explore today are these two things together. One, be open-minded, as we just described. And together with that, what cultural ignorances do we embody, and what social tensions are you failing to recognize? I'm wondering what in this moment, Taylor, pops up for you as we explore those two cards together as our first seed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think I'll start with the cultural tensions, and caveat especially that I acknowledge that there's so much more to learn and understand in regards to fighting systemic oppression. And I think I'm fortunate to have been able to go to Rice University and have access to so many amazing professors like Dr. Timothy Morton, who've been able to guide me in critiquing on a mindset level Western philosophy, and engage with African American Black literature and tackling how we've had to restructure and kind of reframe culture, to bring ourselves into the canon, into the domain, and even the idea of not even thinking about it as we need to be included into it and assimilate towards, Western ideals. But perhaps, how do we speculate and how do we, in the current moment, allow ourselves to be all that we are? So for me, I've been able to dabble so much into speculative utopias, like thinking about the Black radical art tradition, thinking about the speculative art tradition, thinking about the history within America of Black experiences. And I think in grasping the epistemologies and the ways of thinking and knowing of Black radical feminists and womanists, I have that lens because that is also a lens that me with my personal experiences aligns most with. And I recognize that the next step of that is tackling my ignorance in framing stuff in a very US centric way. So thinking, expanding, understand African diasporic experience outside of America, and disrupting that orientation of seeing things in relation to a US experience. And then I think with the Russian-Ukraine war, especially too, is better understanding, the history of colonization and politics within that region. Because I feel like having a foundational understanding of Europe, of Russia is so necessary, I think, to complicate the centering of culture, of prizing knowledge from those areas, and again, inserting yourself into that narrative and understanding the experiences of minoritized groups outside of the US. So that's where my mind went.
Wow, Taylor. Wow. And that's just one card. Right? And, I don't want to make any assumptions for you, but I cannot help feel a very compelling link towards that open-mindedness.
Mm-hmm.
How can we truly even believe that there's another perspective outside of our own if we are not open-minded?
Yeah.
Because for me as a white Caucasian male in the West, I had no idea, Taylor. I literally was conditioned, literally until 2 years ago, till literally 3 years ago, I would have still believed in the Christopher Columbus story. I would have still believed in the fact that pretty much every invention that matters on the planet comes from a white cis human being, right? That is the depth of conditioning. And I really appreciate you inviting us to get curious.
Mm-hmm.
What do we really know? What is really truth? What is even our own story? Because I talk a lot. I've been trying to get a lot of teaching from my Global South peers, etc., Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
and I really know nothing. to be honest, one of my favorite places is to be in a place of curious ignorance, to be honest, because I've had my world blown apart the last couple of years as to how little I know.
Yeah. And I think, even with these kinds of discussions, really opening yourself up and embracing that state of curious ignorance, and not, I think, getting into a state of guilt and shame that, oh, I should have known this already. When you're able to acknowledge stuff on a systems level, that this stuff is conditioned, you can't action change from a state of regret. I think it can be a starting point in terms of, delving into different art, literature, talks. But I think in long-term sustaining efforts to decolonize your mindset, I think it's when you're able to really have self-love and self-care, even as an ally, to, okay, I recognize that I haven't understood these things or been aware of these things before. Now I have the opportunity from a state of awareness to facilitate change. And I think starting from that generative space is, I think, so much more self-fulfilling and community fulfilling.
That's so beautiful. Now, I'm really intrigued. So we've done a little introduction around the cards.
Yeah.
I'm super intrigued around this whole generative. You really speak so beautifully, so clearly about the generative nature, really tackling systemic injustice.
Mm-hmm.
It's really complex, right? That's what I'm learning. This is not a there's your one size fits all. Here we go. We can solve systemic injustice by following this one route, right? And I think what I'm observing, and I'm going to be very bold, what I observe in my own organization, what I observe in the chemicals industry of which I'm part, which is an industry, right, that touches every part of humanity, is a very scared, honestly, bunch of human beings. And I think that guilt and shame piece is not being named enough in my sector. Yeah. So people call it fear, people call it we're too busy, or we don't have time for this. But I don't think people are allowing themselves to embody the feeling of, oh, I don't have all the answers. And I'm wondering what experience, what commentary you may have, Taylor, around that. How do we invite people joining this with, the gut and heart systems as well? I'm just curious what might be popping up around your work, your experience, etc., if I may invite that.
Yes. I think first that there is so much learned hopelessness that is ingrained, I think, through the media. If I can harp a little bit on democratic liberalist approaches to galvanizing support is from a space of fear, like XYZ is going to take away this, XYZ, shaming from a place of shame and guilt and fear. And, when you have a populous, variety of communities that have experienced oppression for so long, and there's also this populace of allies who feel kind of a saviorist complex, kind of a, let's point out who knows more than who else. And you get stuck in this kind of state of fear, this state of saviorism and virtue signaling, and you get stuck there. They're the opposite side, dabbling into coded language, really getting at ingrained racist, sexist, homophobic language that they know at the root, because they're thinking about the heart and they're thinking about generatively, let's protect our worldview. That for them is much more sustainable and has been proven to be most effective. And I think that those of us that are working in the social justice space are wanting to protect, kaleidoscopic worldviews, interconnected ways of being and relating to each other. You can't have a web without the individual threads, I think, pulling together and working together and flowing together. And I think going back to that card with cultural attention, I think, again, people get just a taste of disrupting their mindsets. And they're like, that's enough. Now this is what I can use to signal that I've done the work, when the work is continual. And if you don't, giving much kudos to my mentor, Dr. Timothy Morton, if you're not able to untangle Western ways of approaching things, colonizer ways of approaching things from their mental models, having a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset, thinking in terms of not necessarily inclusion, which signals that you need to assimilate to a dominant center, i.e. cis, white, heterosexual, etc. But the idea of protecting people's ability to be their fullest self as long as it doesn't hurt others. So yeah, it's kind of a long-winded, meandering response to, I think, the current moment for those of us in social justice. We're not leaning into the tensions of doing this work on a root level.
I'm just marinating in that last phrase because I literally got a reaction in the back of my neck and my chest as you shared that, Taylor, because I truly did, because I really want to put out to people that might watch this live, watching us live or watching this back, like, I hope you're feeling the generative energy of Taylor and I's exploration. We are not judging anyone. We are not blaming anyone, but we are pointing like we cannot stay where we are stuck. Right. And I think this is something I really struggle with, Taylor, is trying to invite my peer group, honestly, into this type of dialogue, because there is so much self-worth wrapped up in the next holiday, the next pay rise, the next job title, that conditioning of you will be okay when.
Yes.
Is so deep and ingrained. And like, it's great. And it is helpful on the one side to name that, to point at it. But I'm concerned, and this is something I'd love to get your thoughts on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned about the spiritual bypassing that I'm seeing happen more and more in the West, which is this, yeah, we are all one, we are all connected, we're all love. Yes, we are.
Yes.
And then completely avoiding the realities of the fact that I'm actually taking a plane to Mallorca for a holiday is part of, I'm not saying don't do that, but that is linked to the jet fuel that is actually extracted from this part of the world over here. That lack of interconnectedness that you spoke to, I fear, is probably one of the Western cancers that's under its way, is this Western spiritual bypass. And I'm wondering if you would challenge, build, or add to that somehow from your lens and context.
Yes, I love that you brought that up. To think of someone who's on a healing journey, that can be such a great frustration. You think about, okay, once I'm at this point of healing, I won't feel any pain. I won't feel any hurt like I did before. And I think it's also a Western thing that looking into the future and thinking about utopia, thinking about the ideal situation as the absence, the complete, absolute absence of something else that you think of as negative. When you have a more spiritually embodied approach, you recognize that, for example, my body adopted these ways of coping that traditionally would be seen as bad. But when you think about the body naturally doing what it can to protect itself, you can't look at it from a place of guilt and shame that, okay, my body's doing this, I wanted to stop doing this, like stop having anxiety. When it's like, when you're able to lean into the tension, lean into what media or whatever constructs see as inferior, as outside the norm, and you're able to go into that place, thank it for what it's allowing you to be more aware of, i.e., I don't feel safe in this space, i.e., I don't feel like I'm able to express myself in this space, and recognize on a systems level, like you're not going to feel safe because you're, a Black person, for example, in a traditionally white college. Slaves built this place. You weren't allowed to attend, 20 or so years ago. And when you think about epigenetics and how these certain like survival instincts were ingrained generationally, and you come to that from a place of love and recognize that for you to be here, these instincts were necessary. And now it's kind of on you from a place of awareness, of acknowledgement, of acceptance, moving forward to flow through, okay, how do I create safety for myself, evaluating your relationships, evaluating your community, evaluating your job. I think that when that spiritual bypassing happens because Western society, you think about the hero journey, think about Marvel movies, it's just like, wow, you get powers and y'all not gonna know what to do with them, and you're not gonna hurt all these people, you're just gonna hurt the villain. And that's not realistic. The healing journey that we see in the media is not realistic. How we fight the bad guys is not realistic. It's binary. I feel like when we're able to disrupt those narratives about well-being, those narratives about what it means to save yourself and to save others, that's when we can also move into the generative space of, okay, it's okay to have neurodivergence. It's okay as a minority to not feel safe in XYZ spaces. There's a history there. There's a trauma there. And when you're able to not see something that you need to excise from yourself and your identity, but something that is only a piece or a part of it, and that you can learn through a somatic approach to live with that and kind of enable that to be something that adds to what you're capable of and does not detract from. I think that's when we can really have change, because we're acting from a place of, like, not want to say absolutes, I hate talking about absolutes, but from most or from a lot of fulfillment and awareness of self and others.
I'm so glad you spent the time to come and join me today. No, really, I'm just getting this whole reaction in my head and my upper body, because what's popping up for me as you share that from your context is I just see that binary pattern that keeps on popping up. I'm going to share a website now. There's lots of teachers out there, but one that I in particular have been getting my own teaching with is Tema Okun's work around white supremacy culture patterns. And that binary is one of 18 patterns that she's researched over 30 years. And I'm just sharing that website for anyone else that might be interested. I invite you, my Caucasian peers, please do not get scared by the front end of this website. White supremacy, I'm not saying that you're extreme right wing or whatever else you might be thinking. We're just saying that traditionally, a few white men happen to have set up the game in a way that benefits just those few people, and it still perpetuates today. So what's so interesting for me with this is, despite our very different contexts, Taylor, like we're pointing in the same direction. These cards are pointing us in the same direction, right? It's we don't do our inner healing, regardless of how we identify, regardless of where we live in the world, and own the complexity of why we feel the way we do and what needs to change in order for us to build a truly connected community-based society. Like if we're not doing that inner plus outer work together, we're always going to get locked in that binary, right? It's always going to be about healing myself. I don't have the energy to do something with other people because I'm sorting myself out. Or actually, I'm so focused on changing the world that I'm not doing my inner work. That binary is just so prevalent, Taylor. The more we, just in this conversation, it's come up so many times.
It is, because you can't start from a place of deficit. You have to fill up your own metaphorical pitcher first before you can pour out into others. And I don't think that's a selfish thing. It's just like a body, that's a natural thing. And if we think about seasons and, indigenous ways of knowing and relating, really recognizing that there are times to exert and push, and there's times to rest and hibernate. And because this work requires you to do the inner and outer work and to do it on a root level, you're going to have to rest and kind of marinate on things. And when you make space for the breath, the meditation, the body work, the synthesizing, and moving from just being, here to here, you'll find that your work is deepened significantly, and the impact is spread exponentially, because I think people respond most to stories. We're humans. And when you're able to really own your story and embody your story and embrace the journey of your story, I think that's when you're able to invite others to do the same. And when you're from a place of fulfillment in self, or an awareness of where you're working towards for yourself, I think you're able to have a much stronger community.
It resonates so much with me, and I just want to share possiblefutures.earth, just for anybody again that might be watching or watch this back. I've learned so much through this incredible Global South to Global South regenerative crew, who very gratefully, have allowed me in to learn with them, only because in my own way I've been doing some of the work, right? And it's just, I want to point them out in particular because I've just been on a journey, Taylor, with them, a 16-week journey, their pilot course around intro to decolonial sustainability. And literally, honestly, at the end of it, I sat there. I was one of the guest coaches, actually, as well as a journeyer, a traveler.
Yeah.
And I just sat there at the end. We're doing the reflection, a 90-minute reflection. And I just, floods of tears came from absolutely nowhere, just went bang. And I just couldn't stop for about 3 minutes. And I've literally got 12 female or non-binary identifying humans looking at me. And in that moment, I felt so held, Taylor.
Yeah.
I didn't feel any guilt. I didn't feel any shame. And that was the final of many learnings that I had through that experience. Where else would I in the West be able to just burst into floods of tears for 3 minutes and not be worried about being judged? Not worry about, is it going to impact my promotional prospects at work? Do you know, like, that's the level of toxicity that perpetuates Western life still. And I'm just so excited about you doing the work you're doing, and that this is becoming an okay conversation to have more and more.
Yes, me too. And I think what you're touching on as well is that there's healing for you too. When you think about white supremacy, you think about Western colonization, imperialism, all those things. In order for it to work, it had to monolithicize like the experiences of white people. And you forget that like the Irish were impacted by the British, et cetera, et cetera. And by nature of it needing to succeed, it had to exterminate indigeneity for white people. So there's also a loss and a trauma for white people. And I think when allies are able to recognize that there's healing for themselves as well, and that there's an impact closer to home, it's not just for the other, I think that will also deepen the work as well.
Right. All I've got to say is, like, just so you know, it's all about energy, not time. You and I know that. But this is over 28 minutes. Just go. Ping.
Yeah.
So I want to honor your time and energy more than mine, because I could be here all afternoon with you. But I'd love to. I'm curious. What's popping up? What's clarified? What's new? What's meaningful to you following those two cards as we sit in this beautiful 28-minute exploration, as we think again about the importance of staying open-minded, and what cultural ignorances do we continue to embody, and what social tensions are we failing, to recognize? I'm wondering if anything feels any different, or anything's more clarified for you around those topics as we go into our weekends.
Yeah, I think the cards were intentional for me. I think energetically I've been in this space of deepening awareness, of recognizing with the framework I'm building, which is called practical kaleidoscopic framework. Where are the gaps in my awareness? Where are the gaps in what knowledge is I'm trying to interconnect and bring together? And this is also an invitation to go back into body and into my own healing journey, which I think once you're able to confront the trauma and give it a name, then it becomes, how do you retrain the nervous system? How do you figure out how to tap into your body and acknowledge and accept your body more? So this has been so aligned for me. Yeah. Oh, and one last thing, ego. I think is when people put themselves on a pedestal and allow themselves to become quote unquote idols. I think, is also a big issue with the movement towards decolonization. I think start being from a persistent, consistent place of humbleness, I think is also important. Because I've studied a lot, researched a lot, but there's so much more, and so many people that specialize in other areas that are just, if not more, passionate in certain degrees, more aware, smarter. So yeah, I think having that orientation that there's always more work to do, but seeing it from a place of generative, not deficit.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really, and I'm coming back to that beautiful picture you painted around, like the spider's web, how interconnected everything is. I'm so grateful for this technology on the one hand, allowing you and I to do this today.
Yeah.
But I'm also grateful knowing the destruction and impact on other parts of the world.
Yes.
Because for me to be able to do this with you, certain communities are being moved off their land. Certain communities do not have the rewards for their land being extracted, being dominated, being controlled by multinational companies like my own.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not judging anybody. It's the systemic levers that are off kilter still. And what I've been reminded of today is just your grace. We've met for the first time today. I know we've sort of tracked each other a little bit for a while, but I'm just really appreciative of the trust that can be built very quickly from people from very different backgrounds, very different contexts, when we come from that place of humility and vulnerability and not needing to be right. That's what's popped up for me on this. Like my cultural ignorance, my social tensions, I would not have failed to recognize in the past would have been that I would have believed in meritocracy 5 years ago. I would have believed that I got my degree, I've got the position I've got, all because I'm so bloody brilliant as Gary. Totally dismissing all of the systemic challenges and barriers that people of color, black humans, white humans, disabled humans, however they may identify, like the system is so rigged to help people that look and sound like me. And I'm saying that not to shame or judge, but hopefully to model that it's okay to be in dialogue and be in community and to build just relationships with one another, Taylor. That's really what's come up for me today. So thank you. Thanks to anyone that may have watched live or watched this back. But I want to give you the last word. Is there anything you'd like people to know more about, Taylor? Is there anything that you're up to? Do you want to let people know about anything that you're working on in particular, or direct them to websites? I put your LinkedIn up today so far, but I'd love for you to direct people anywhere else if it's relevant for you today.
Thank you so much. I do think I want to thank you again for inviting me to this. I do have quite a bit of anxiety being my fullest self and speaking about my research and what I'm passionate about. So I think this has been a great next step for me. And I would, as a final word to the viewers, invite them to be more gentle with themselves. Urgency is a big part of white supremacy culture. And I think we're still in a pandemic. There's a war going on. There's inflation. The US is in a recession, which of course has impacts across other world economies. There's so much to navigate. And I think from whatever capacity you have, you can do the work, and it can just be a little bit, to start from. I would invite people to dabble into the idea of intersectionality. I think that's a great place to start from, is being aware of the different axes of oppression people have, depending on their identity. And then I'm happy to share that I've founded my own LLC. So I'm happy to work towards making my framework accessible. I intend to build out an educational program around it, and to also consult with people, whether it be on an individual coaching basis or on a community organizational basis. So I'm happy to start doing that work as well.
Wonderful. Well, again, you can find Taylor on LinkedIn. There's the address for a final time. I will be reviewing this. It's been an incredible conversation, Taylor. Thank you so much. And the beautiful thing about YouTube is that you can cut 60-second clips from previous conversations. So look out for some insights very, very soon from this beautiful conversation. So thank you, Taylor. Thanks for everyone watching or watching back, and have a great so-called weekend. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Take care.